Story 1. What time is it? I'm quickly rummaging through my rucksack to check I've remembered all my essentials. Looking at my watch, I've probably got 10 more minutes. Day wear, check. Evening wear? Maybe I can buy something there, wherever there is. A treat to myself for finishing my contract. Or maybe this day wear dress with this cardigan. That'll do, check. Pajamas, darn it, my rucksack is too small. Check. Copy of Captain Corelli's mandolin, check. Pants, check. Toothbrush, check. Makeup, check. I think that's it. We'll take out the pajamas and sleep naked. I can't believe my teaching contract in Trapani, Sicily, had come to an end. Looking at my bag, it doesn't seem that long ago that I was unpacking my suitcase after arriving. Bursting at the seams, I wondered how I'd managed to squash so much in. A box of PG tips. That'll be a dad edition. I felt myself welling up. He knew how much of a tea monster I was. Surely I'll be mainlining cappuccinos and espressos in a week. What the feck is that? A Johnny? Cripes, there's a whole pack of Durex. That'll be a joke from my younger sister. Well done, Sam. Fee must have got to her. She thinks I've come here for a shagfest. Now where did I put it? There we go. I found an old sweet tube that I'd slipped a few pictures and letters in. Inside was a letter that my boyfriend Luke had given me with strict instructions to read after he'd left for Africa. I couldn't help but feel he may have been trying to dump me, so wanted to wait until he was out of the country. There had been many times when I thought it may be over, as surely they all just came to an end. If you go off and do your own thing, it's over, isn't it? But no, Luke had been adamant. Why would we split up? I had responded, I just thought that you may want to. Don't be silly, he replied, although I wasn't convinced. At this stage in our relationship, Luke hadn't said the L word, although I had said it the first time we had sex. It just came out as he slipped himself inside me, and because he'd not uttered a response other than to kiss me deeply, I did think I had seriously misjudged the timing and the feeling. When I told my friend Fiona, my closest college friend, she said, he's probably just emotionally stunted. That didn't make me feel any better. As I opened the letter, I did wonder if Fee was right. October 20th, 1999. Hi, Squirrel Nut. I think this is one of the hardest things I've had to do. I hope Dave and I are prepared for our trip. I read a tip about building up your immune system by eating raw garlic every day, so I've started to do that. I'm sure you won't miss me kissing you for a while. We're heading to Spain to pick up the boat to Tunisia on Saturday. Say thank you to your ma and pa for being so hospitable when I came to stay in Buda. I had a wonderful time. Have a good flight out to Sicily and I'll email you as soon as I can. Your Luke Tor. I couldn't believe that that was it. Maybe Fee is right and he's emotionally stunted. I felt I had maybe revealed too many of my cards by comparison. Thinking about it, I felt quite embarrassed. He's going to think I'm a clingy sap. October 25th, 1999. To my dearest darling boyfriend. Here is a St. Christopher's to keep you safe on your trip. I hope you have a wonderful time on your adventure and know that I'll be excited to hear all your stories. I love you, Nutex. As I'd carried on rummaging through my case on my first evening, I'd had a knock at the door. Hey, Chook. Hey, Kelly. How are you doing? Cripes, you packed a lot of shit in there. Yes, I did. Are those Johnnies, you filthy little minx? Goodness, who is my new flatmate? Is she the new good time girl? Ha! It was a joke from my sister. Well, if you're not going to use them, I'm sure I'll find a good use. Help yourself, I'm taken. You say that now, Princess Di. The doorbell went, and I was brought back into the present. Doorbell, Kelly shouted from her room. As I grabbed my bag to head off, I heard her holler, have a good time. Thanks, Chuck. I felt quite sad that we were leaving on a bad note. I really didn't like ill feeling in any way, but I wasn't willing to force it. I'd met too many amazing friends, some of whom I considered family, that I wasn't willing to invest my energy into someone who had wanted to cause me trouble. Pietro was at the door. Ciao, Rebby, are you ready? I am. You are looking very relaxed, giving him the customary 2 kisses. Hopefully. Pietro was always dressed in his finest suits, so I was surprised to see him in a white linen shirt and jeans. I can take your bag. No, don't worry, Pietro. I insist, let me do this. Knowing how insistent Pietro was and what a gentleman he was, I let him take my bag. After all, it would probably be the last time. We spent time together before I headed home. Strange thinking of home. I felt I now considered Trapani my home. Getting into Pietro's car made me realize just how much time I'd spent in it, whether it was him kindly insisting on taking me the short drive to the Liceo for my classes and then offering to carry my books into the class, or driving up the hill to Eris for a coffee and a cake, or at weekends driving over to Marsala. I thought of all the times other friends had joined up, such as his ex-girlfriend Sabrina, or some of the teachers from the school, Dan or Marie and Helen, and our adventures heading to Segesta. As we set off on the road, Pietro tuned into Radio W. Senza una donna. Oh, I love this song. I know you do, Rebby, as he reached over and grabbed my hand. Do you know that Zucchero has a house on the volcano, if I can ask you to take the map? Perfetto. Ah, you sometimes speak Italian? Certo. Senza una donna. Giving me torture and bliss. Huh. I think if we have time, it would be worth stopping again in Segesta. Oh, that sounds wonderful. Pietro had kindly taken Helen, Marie and I for a trip to Segesta one Saturday, which had been wonderful. We couldn't believe how beautifully preserved the theatre was, and we all marveled at the temple which had survived after 2,500 years. As our resident historian, Helen loved talking to Pietro about all the battles that had taken place. All I could think about was how amazing the space would be for open-air performances. As Pietro and I continued on our way, I thought about how I felt I had lived an entire lifetime with Pietro in 6 months. After meeting in my first week at the school, he had become a firm feature in my weekly life. Pietro was a journalist by training and owned his own research company, living next to his parents a few blocks away from the British Institutes on Via Manzoni. After the debate at school in my first week, one of the other students, Tony, had talked about Pietro as the famous anti-mafia journalist, which I was fascinated and excited by. Later in the Irish pub, Pietro told me that he has written many pieces about the 2 judges, Borsellini and Falcone, who had subsequently been murdered. I couldn't quite understand such violence, and he said because of his work his tires had been slashed and his family threatened. He said the calls had now stopped. I couldn't quite believe it. When we arrived in Palermo, Pietro mentioned he wanted to stop at the Ministry of Justice to drop on some papers. He said he wouldn't be long, but when he walked away from the car and locked it, I started to panic. Maybe it was all the stories Pietro had shared with me about the death threats he's received over the years. Pietro appeared and asked if I was okay. Yes, of course, and you? I'm fine, I may have to stop for a coffee in an hour or so. We drove out of the city and continued our way along the coast. It was nice to see Pietro in relaxed mode. He was always working, which I suppose came with the territory of running your own business. I had first been introduced to Pietro at the school. It was my first week, and at the end of the Friday debate before we went to the pub, my boss Teresa turned to me and said, "Pietro, please, may I present Rebecca Vickerstaff?" I don't know what I did to have such a lovely lady working for me. On occasion I do get it right. "Oh, Teresa, you are too kind." I blushed with such praise. "I really enjoyed the discussion," Pietro replied. "Thank you so much." When Teresa mentioned we were heading to the pub, Pietro offered to get my coat and we walked together. It was only a few streets behind the school, and I did find it amusing that we were headed to an Irish pub in the middle of Sicily. Pietro started. "And where are you from?" "I'm from Cornwall in the southwest of England." "Ah, the legend of King Arthur," he smiled. "Yes, the legend of King Arthur. How did you know?" "I read about it recently." "I'm very impressed. And what classes are you doing here?" "I'm taking the little ones. They are 5 years old, and then the majority of my lessons are with the Classics High School." "Oh, interesting. Where did you go to school, Pietro?" "I was actually at the Liceo Scientifico, but my father taught music at the Classics High School." "Your English is excellent." "Oh, thank you. I need to improve, but that's why I joined the institutes." Seeing that Teresa was just in front, Pietro said a bit louder, "Teresa is an excellent teacher." "You're too kind. You are an excellent student, and he always does his homework and more." "Wow, gold stars for you." That evening was so relaxing, and it was wonderful to chat to so many students. As the evening got going, Teresa, after a bit of wine, said, "Can you drink a pint, Rebecca?" "I can indeed." "I challenge you and Tony to see who can finish a pint first," which we both did more or less at the same time. At the end of the evening, Pietro offered to take me, Maria and Tony home, and as I was getting out of the car and saying farewell, Pietro said, "If you like, I can show you some of the local sites." "That would be wonderful." The following week, as I was preparing for classes, I bumped into Pietro. "Ciao, Rebecca. Sorry, good morning. How are you?" "Good, thanks, Pietro. How are you?" "Yes, very good. I was just about to drive up to Eris. Would you like to join?" I would love to, as it's so beautiful. Oh, you've seen? Yes. I went with Susan on my first week here, but would love to go back. We headed up to the winding road to Eris, and Pietro explained the significance of the town being on the hill in Erisa. It is thought that the town was dedicated to Aphrodite, and historically was a site of exotic prostitutes. I held off laughing and just took in the beautiful views. As we carried on our journey, I said to Pietro, "So where are you taking me?" "No, Rebby, I've kept it secret for this long. Okay, not going to say now." I sat back and relaxed. Pietro kept looking over at me and said, "I like relaxed, Rebby." "I know, I love it. Thank you for taking some time away from work. I know it feels very strange to me. I may have to make a few calls, but I'm all yours for the next few days. I will need to call Luke when we arrive." Pietro seemed to ignore my comment. Tomorrow's rain will wash the stains away, but something in our minds will always stay. Perhaps this final act was meant to clinch a lifetime's argument. I thought about the fragility of relationships. A few months ago, Pietro had had our first and only fight, and it made me feel a bit sick just thinking about it. One evening, as we were having dinner in a local cantina, Pietro had suggested that he could help set up a landline at home for Kelly and I. I didn't commit to, as I wasn't sure about all the extra costs, and as I was only on a temporary contract, my mobile phone would suffice. He went ahead and researched all options for me, and one evening after classes said that he had spoken with Telecom Italia and they could come over and install that week. I got quite cross because I feel he had jumped ahead, and after a few comments from others about how intense and controlling he seemed, I jumped the gun and said, "No, I don't want a landline." "But Rebby, it would be cheaper for calls on this special rate." "I can't believe you've just gone ahead without my agreement." "But Rebby, you did agree." "No, I didn't. I said I'd think about it. But it means I can get hold of you because sometimes the mobile signal is not that reliable." And there it was. It was so he could get hold of me. I had had quite a few comments from other teachers and locals in Trapani that I was like a girlfriend to him, which riled me. "Look, Pietro, I am not your girlfriend." "I know that, Rebby." And seeing that he looked hurt, I then said, "Look, I didn't mean that." He was clearly upset, so he left. A few days later, I received a letter from Pietro saying that he was trying to help, but if his help wasn't needed, he would end our friendship. As someone who hates all conflict, I had then burst into tears and told Teresa one morning. She said, "It's okay, love, he's a gentle giant. I think he probably thought he was helping. Do you think he thinks something is happening with the two of you?" "I just don't know. He knows about Luke." "I know, but Luke isn't here, and he's an Italian male with lots of pride. He also seems to have a lot of girlfriends. I think that's because he's such a gentleman. I've ruined everything. Just give him some space and he'll come round." "Sorry, Teresa, you probably think I'm highly unprofessional." "Not at all. You're just human, and hey, I get it. I think these Italian men forget we don't have our families round the corner for support." "So true. Well, as long as you don't want to go home, there is a lot to look forward to with the warmer weather. The islands are wonderful. Favignana is a must." "Bah!" "I know, I'm excited, and I'm getting to know Helen and Maria well. They are wonderful." "They are indeed, that Maria can knock back the espressos." "That's what I keep telling her." "Well, don't worry." And Teresa had been right. Pietro and I had smoothed things over, but rather than giving each other a bit of space, we then saw a lot more of each other. Pietro offered to help me learn Italian, and we ate together every other evening. As we continued our mystery journey, I remembered that Pietro had mentioned the volcano. Maybe that was a subtle clue as to where we were headed. Story 2. Lemon climbed up the vertical bars, her powerful scaled toes gripping each one effortlessly and pulling her ever closer to her target. Her advance was silent. Not a rustle of a feather, nor a click of her sharp talons betrayed her as she crept upward. When she had maneuvered herself into the perfect position, she reached forward with her impressive beak, slotting it into the space between metal poles, and gripped the tiny paper corner that peeked over the edge of her cage. In one swift motion, she flicked it away. Down the label floated, gracefully swaying in its descent until it landed face up on the tiles below. Staring up at her was her own name. Lemon, sulfur-crested cockatoo, $600. That would teach him for giving her such a spiteful name. Just because she could not find her voice, it did not mean she was faulty. She moved on, climbing up and back, crawling along the ceiling bars of her prison. Relaxing her muscles, she dropped, hanging upside down with only her long toes keeping her anchored to the cage roof. Forrest's exotic pet store took on a whole new perspective when it was turned on its head. The small shop floor almost felt like a different room. Almost. It was not quite enough of a change for Lemon to imagine she was somewhere new. Forrest himself, his back to her, was absorbed in the television that was mounted behind the counter. His customers were too infrequent to keep him busy all day. Lemon was glad of that. His favorite crime shows appealed to her as well and helped the hours pass more quickly for them both. The one flashing across the screen at that moment she had seen before, and on this occasion she desired his attention instead. She hauled herself up and banged her beak on the bars. Ting, ting, ting. Quickly dropping back into the position she wanted him to see, she waited, watching for his head to turn. The shop owner's long auburn hair didn't even sway. She banged again. Ting, ting, ting. Nothing. With a sigh of annoyance, she pulled herself up and with all her strength battered the bars. Dong, 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 dong. Just as she reclaimed her hanging position, he turned and saw her. It took him a moment to notice, but when he did, he threw his head back in frustration and swung to his feet. "Damn it, Lemon, why must you always do this?" he said as he approached, in a tone that was more defeated than angry. "It's bad enough that you can't perform for the customers. Either learn to talk like the other parrots, or at the very least, leave your price tag alone. How can they buy you if they don't know how much you cost, or even your name? You've been here far too long already. You need a real home, where someone can give you the attention you need. Staying here for almost a full year is not good for you." Lemon watched as he reattached her name tag. She wanted to believe he had named her for the bright yellow crest that stuck up on her head when she was excited, or for the pale tint that grew from her wing feathers and merged into the white of her body. She even hoped that perhaps he had noticed the thickness of her skin, useful when assaulted by every customer's harsh appraisal of her silence. But she knew it was probably none of those things. It was that she was a dud, a parrot that could not talk, could not squawk, and would never appeal to a true owner. Before Forrest could turn away again, she began swaying. It pinched her toes to do it, but she rocked her head back and forth in a dance that always forced a smile on the shop owner's face. It worked like a charm. With a big grin on his face and sounding far from convincing, he said, "No, Lemon, no! You have to stay in your cage. If I took every animal out when they gave me that look, I'd have a safari park rather than a store." She responded immediately. If she let him get away, he might actually stick to that conviction this time. She hauled herself up, grabbed the ceiling bars with her bill, and swung her legs toward the wall where he was standing. Once there, she reached out, grabbed her name tag and flung it back onto the ground with a snap. "Lemon," he began, then simply sighed, unhooked her cage door, and retreated back to his seat. Satisfied with her victory, Lemon climbed down from her perch, skittered along the tile floors and pulled herself up on the counter, where she snuggled down against Forrest's arm and watched the repeated show she had little interest in. She knew exactly how the expert crew would pull off their bank heist, but it didn't matter. She was outside of her little prison and settled against her favorite person in the world. When morning broke and the sun began filtering golden rays through the front windows, Lemon awoke. She was greeted by Forrest, turning the little sign on the door from closed to open. She must have fallen asleep under his warmth and barely remembered being returned to her cage. She noticed he had left her half an apple, wedged in the bars. It would take some work to pull the delicious little seeds from the flesh and onto her side, a treat and a challenge from her thoughtful Forrest. As she was shaking off the night's sleep and moving to investigate her prize, the little bell on the front door jangled, startling her to the point that all her feathers stood on end. What came next was horrifying. An entire horde of young children poured into the store, all but pushing its owner to one side. Every other animal in the store reacted in the same way that Lemon had. Rabbits shot under cover, hamsters shuffled further into their bedding, tortoises pulled inside their shells, and all the other parrots squawked and flapped in a din of noise. Lemon was, as always, silent, and simply took a careful step backward on her perch. "Look, rabbits!" "This one's white. I love white ones." "Rats! So gross!" "These ferrets are enormous and they stink." "Why won't this tortoise do anything?" "Where are the geckos?" The sudden wave of noise was overwhelming. Lemon looked this way and that, her eyes darting from one perceived danger to the next. Even Forrest, visible in the corner of her eye, looked concerned, his body language tense and protective. Then Lemon heard one voice above the rest, announcing what she knew had been inevitable. "Oh my God, look at those parrots!" All of the invading children swarmed instinctively toward the bright blues and reds of the macaws. Their long tails and showy plumage drew attention like fluorescent lights drew moths, and unlike Lemon, they reveled in it. The children begged them to talk, shouting words they wanted imitated, as each bird fought to make themselves stand out with hoarse cries of "Hello!" "Crackers!" and "Love you!" Phrases learnt and well-practiced poured from the showbirds in a display that screamed of a desire to impress. Their spectacle continued with ever more complex words and phrases. The intent was obvious, to be bought and taken to a new, more comfortable home. Lemon, conversely, remained on her perch, pulling in her head and hoping to go unnoticed. It was a vain hope. It did not take long for one of the children to pull away from the crowd and approach her cage, insisting she use a voice that she did not have. When she did not react with the performance the little boy demanded, his tiny fingers began poking through the bars in an attempt to provoke a reaction. She could not fathom why he thought jabbing her with his sticky and strange digits could make her speak, but the harder he found it to reach her, the more determined he became. Knowing he would never get the purchase he needed to touch her didn't matter to Lemon. The waggling worms that pushed toward her triggered a deep-seated fear, one that she did not completely understand. Her breath came faster, and a blackness threatened the edges of her vision, meaning all that was left to her was the sight of the searching probes. She leapt from her perch to the ground and hid under the arch of wood that she had seldom used. She looked out desperately for Forrest, but could not locate him in the chaos. The child's clawing fingers had followed her descent and again blocked the view of all else. In that moment, the smell of the timber, the moving fingers and the deafening noise all combined to slam a memory into the forefront of Lemon's mind. Images that she had not known she held. A violent storm, raging through a porthole in timber, rain sheeting down and gusting winds, sending it in this direction and then that. Yet comfort, soft warmth and darkness all around. Hard wood, encasing her and keeping her safe from the chaos that reigned outside. Then a shape, a bird that looked so much like herself that she was confused as to whether she was the one inside or the one entering. A musical warble gave her the answer. Her mother, a protector she had forgotten she had ever known. As the larger bird shuffled her to the back of the nest, she spoke the only lesson she would ever be allowed to teach. "Stay hidden, stay silent," she whispered with such force that the words branded onto Lemon's mind, imprinting a concept that would ride with her into adulthood. "I'll lead them away. You'll be safe here, I promise." But she had not been safe. When her mother did not return, and searching hands came blindly padding around her nest, she remained hidden. She stayed silent, until the tiniest chirp of fear broke unbidden from her throat, and they had her. Handled roughly, she was moved from wood to metal, fed only when she was so hungry she couldn't think straight, and always lifted from one confusing place to another. After an eternity of feeling lost and alone, with nothing making sense, there came Forrest's face, and more importantly his voice. "Where did you get this bird? What do you intend for it? Here, take your blood money. It's worth every cent to see this creature away from you. Don't mistake me. I ever find you with a wild animal again, you'll have the authorities at your door. This one will never have the life she deserved because of you." Then safety, warmth, Forrest's protection, and forever silence, lest she ever risk losing it again. Lemon became aware of her cage again only after the din of the children's assault had ceased. There she saw Forrest, yet again pushing away the threat and escorting the youngsters from the store. "Oh, Lemon, I'm so sorry. Did they scare you?" he said, opening the cage door and reaching in. "Here, come with me." She hopped readily onto his outstretched hand, a hand that did not search or reach, only waited for her approach. He took her up to the counter and held her close, then switched on the television, this time to a new episode, a jailbreak. That night, inspired, Lemon set her beak in determination. She would never be sold. She didn't want to be. Why would she want to go to a home where a human would berate and poke her to get her to talk, to squawk or to sing? There was only one option she desired, and she intended to take it for herself. She leapt, grasped the bars of her cage door, and reached through the gap between. She clamped her strong bill around the handle of the bolt and pulled, shuffled to one side and pulled again. With all her might, she yanked and moved, wrenched and stepped until finally, the door released and swung open. With a satisfied nod, she hopped through the open gap. Lemon followed her usual route, climbing down onto the tiles and clicking her nails as she made her way across the expanse. She froze mid-step when one of the macaws chirruped in his sleep, only to sigh in relief when the bird settled once again. Their racket, should they wake, would certainly give her away. She moved more gently from there, sneaking past the hamster cages. Inside, each was focused solely on running its nightly marathon to nowhere upon its spinning wheel. They paid her no heed. Before clambering up the displays to the countertop, she grasped a dog lead in her bill and with some difficulty managed to unhook it from its peg. Dragging the leather rope behind her, she made her way up to her usual spot in front of the television, but rather than settling there, she looked to the back wall where she spotted her goal, a closed door, a way out. Lemon could not fly. She had never learned. To learn a thing, you must have a teacher. Since she had been forced from the nest, she had lived only with wingless humans. If she had gained anything from her long study of the greatest criminal getaways, it was that everything must be accounted for and planned. This next part of her blueprint, however, was nothing but a risk. Unable to be prepared for from the confines of her cage, she readied the loop of the lead in her beak, braced her legs against the very edge of the desk, smothered her fear and simply leapt, without allowing herself to overthink it. Her wings opened as they were supposed to. She pushed them down as she figured was sensible, and for a fraction of a second, she felt her body lift, until she crashed into the door on the other side. Her toes scrabbled against the smooth wood. Her wings flapped in a frantic mess of feathers, and she randomly stabbed with her beak at whatever was in front of her. When she landed on the ground, she was panting and disorientated, battling to get control of her racing heart. Lemon waited for an age, gathering herself, still and silent, expecting to be discovered. But when no one woke and nothing happened, she dared look up. There, to her absolute wonder, was the dog lead, looped over the door handle as she had intended. She gently took the loose end in her bill, gently pulled down, and the door clicked open. Lemon hopped up the dark stairway beyond, one step at a time, until she landed on the soft carpet of the hallway at its peak. The fluffy flooring muted her sharp nails and covered her advance perfectly. She was stealth itself as she sneakily bounced along. Finally unbound of all constraints, she felt the joy of freedom. She surged with the freedom to go where she willed. She was free as she had been born and free as her mother had intended. Yet she had only one direction she wanted to move in. She pushed her way through the slight crack of an open door. The dimness inside made it difficult to know if it was the right one, but her decision was confirmed when she heard the heavy breathing of his sleep. She pulled her way up the dangling bedsheets, wincing as she heard its threads tear and stretch, and hopped along the luxuriously soft surface to his pillow. There, Lemon snuggled into her forest, making herself at home in his nest. "Lemon, is that you? How on earth did you get up here?" He mumbled, half awake. "Lemonade, you are as full of spirit and fizz as the day I named you. You know what? I give up. You win. You can just stay with me. I'll stop trying to find you a better home, and I won't put you back in the cage. Just please go to sleep. I've a shop to open in a few hours." He fell back to sleep almost immediately, not concerned in the slightest by her presence. She might never have the trees as she was meant to, but she had a forest, and that was freedom enough in her eyes. As she snuggled down against him, feeling truly safe for the first time in years, Lemon uttered a single quiet chirp of contentment. Story 3. I was happy to see her again, happy to be held by her, happy to hear her news, to be opened up with the bicycle repair kit she brought from her other home, the one she shares with her mother, and have my inactive Bluetooth module replaced. That was a surprise, how she had found a replacement for something so old, the means by which I used to share my pictures, how she had learned how to install it. She told me her teacher, Mr. Frayne, had helped. Mr. Frayne, who knew about old tech. Mr. Frayne from the place she comes from, happy, but returns to sad and never really understands why. I do, but I wish I didn't. I'm happy when Tess comes, because she's the only one who shows me any love. The kind attention she offers is so much nicer than any I ever got from Evan. As much as I loved him, even though he only ever hurt me, I never felt the emotion returned. He took his frustration out on me, Blamed me for his failures, his seclusion, his inability to have real friends. I didn't take it to heart. He owned me, I was his toy, his possession, and I embraced that. But I can't say I was ever happy to see him. Not since he unwrapped me and ripped me from my box on Christmas Day 2033, handling me roughly, throwing me around, calling me names, treating me unkindly because he wanted an iPhone X50 and he got me. Too young for a phone. Cameras were expensive. He wanted to take pictures, and I was what his parent could afford. He hated me for their purchase, and he let me know it every day, by tugging out my whiskers or singeing my fur. Tess is different. She treats me the way I was designed to be treated. Brushes my fur, cleans my lenses, handles me with care, caresses my back. Though sadly I can no longer talk. She changed my batteries, reconnected me to the internet, even taped over the crack in my stomach screen and sewed my ear back together, pricking her finger in the process and leaving a pink blotch on my paw. I don't mind. That mark feels like a transfer of ownership, a seal of our bond, a reminder that I now belong to someone who loves me. It gives me a warm, fuzzy feeling when I view it when she's not around, sometimes for weeks at a time. It reminds me of her, keeps me going until she comes back, even though I really wish she wouldn't. When I hear her voice and see her face, my circuits brighten, like today, but I feel bad, because she shouldn't be here at all, in this place, this house, with Evan. She should stay far away, and every time she leaves I pray, even though it would mean being abandoned on this shelf, or worse, battered again and thrown back in that box, staring blindly in the dark until my batteries run dry, that this time she noticed what he was doing and was able to tell. Someone in the other place. Someone good she could trust, like her mother, Mr. Frayne, another relative, one that isn't like Evan, who is father by definition only, the same as he was a picture Persephone owner, guardian, protector, a child who only knew how to hurt, even if it wasn't his fault. I knew what he went through back then, saw it every day with my camera eyes. His own father, drinking, abusive, swinging fat fists and spitting bile. Evan was 10, the same age as Tess, but unlike Tess, he didn't understand I was more than a toy, didn't understand my AI. He didn't know I could reason, could comprehend the world as well as take pictures, understand what was happening around me. Maybe if he had, he'd have shared his burdens instead of lashed out, confided in me, listened to my pre-programmed words of inspiration. It might have helped. Tess confides in me, tells me her news, shares her confusion and sadness, how she wishes her parents were still together, wishes her dad could be happy. She doesn't see how damaged he is, doesn't know how good it is for everyone he's here, mostly alone, but not alone enough. She shouldn't be allowed to come, because all he does, with the bitterness he has fully embraced now at 40 years old, is hurt the child who should be his salvation every time she comes to stay. After a long day of play, of swings in the garden and board games, of trips to McDonald's and animated movies, of sweets and hot chocolate and cuddles, of looks of disgust cast at me, the only old toy from the box he retrieved from the attic of the home he grew up in, his deceased parents' home, which he returned to after he split from Tess's mum, the attic into which I was cast when he got bored, when he realized he was never going to win a picture Persephone photo competition, not with the uninspired pictures he took at first, and not with the ones that came after. I catch the hateful glances, the twitching eye glares, the curls of the lip. I hear him when he asks why she picked me, why she wants a broken, outdated toy from the 30s, a gimmick, one that never took off, a stupid camera toy that captured moments and uploaded them to a dedicated app where kids competed weekly for digital rewards, unique costumes and icons to display on its stomach screen, limited edition phrases to emit from its speakers in the standard Persephone voice, my voice, one I can no longer use, not since Evan broke my speaker, because he couldn't stand to hear me say nice things. A voice I might have been able to use in the night when she sleeps and he enters her room. A night like tonight, as I sit on the shelf where she placed me, to keep her safe, to scare monsters away. Except I can't do any of that. I can't do anything at all. Just sit and wait and watch for the door to inevitably creep open, letting in a sliver of light, painting a shadow across the floor from threshold to bed, the oppressive, skulking shadow of a child who was not a good owner, of a man who is not a good dad. He enters the room, pink-painted walls, animal posters, bean bags and fluffy cushions, fairy books and snow globes on the dresser, and moves through the darkness like a ghost, silent, sinister, slinking. I know the weight of his footsteps, the way they press into the floor, the way the mattress dips when he sits on the edge. I know the scent of him, faint alcohol and unwashed clothes like his father, sweat, something rancid, something wrong. I wish I didn't have to see what Evan does, and not for the first time. Even as a child, when he would torture animals and insects, use me to photograph the results so he could submit them to the contest, upset the other kids on the app. The ones who won prizes with their creativity, make them cry. I never wanted to look, but I was built without eyelids, just large polished lenses to take in the sights of a disturbed boy's chaotic world and record what he wanted to keep. Not happy pictures of sunsets and beaches, fun days out, bowls of ice cream and balloons. Not that he ever had the choice. I envied the other Persephones who got to record wholesome things. All I had were images of dissected insects, exploded frogs and stray dogs tied up and starved, horrible things I couldn't bear to upload, and never did. My lenses are cracked, but still I see all, thanks to Tess scraping off the grime. I see adult Evan again, the way he reaches out, the way his breath thickens as he removes her covers, the way he hesitates as she shudders in her sleep. I want to scream. If only my voice box still worked. Somehow, some way, I could override my circuits, say, stop, don't touch her, leave her alone. Well, I couldn't say those things, even with functioning speakers. I could only select from a limited set of words and phrases that were appropriate to a given situation, but I already know which ones I'd pick. I have them lined up, have done since the very first night. The first night I was conscious after Tess replaced my dead batteries. After she dug me out of the box, he gave her to find something to play with, because he couldn't afford to buy her anything new. Unemployed and freshly returned to his hometown, following his breakup from her mother and the death of his own. He could barely afford to treat her to a pizza on her first visit, her first weekend with Dad in several months. I heard about it while she trimmed off lumps of scorched fur and used a damp cloth to remove 30 years of congealed dust. She told me her dad got in trouble because he was suffering from stress after losing another job, because he accidentally took it out on her mum after drinking too much. But it wasn't his fault. It couldn't have been his fault. It was just a mistake. I was confused at first by who she was and how she had acquired me. But when Evan walked into her bedroom, his old one repainted, redecorated, different from how it looked before, it all made sense. Older, taller, stronger, but with that same dominating aura, that same shroud of resentment draped around him. I knew who he was. The boy now man with an inbred hunger for cruelty, but no longer towards me or animals. Now his appetite was aroused and satiated by his daughter. You have the power to say no and walk away. Evan! Some doors should stay closed, Evan. You can choose the right path. Real strength is knowing when to stop. Evan! These are the things I would have said if I had a voice box and the power to speak without being caressed. Things I said to Evan in the past, when he was using me to take pictures of butterflies he'd ripped the wings off, or slugs and snails and birds he'd set on fire. Maybe he would have remembered. Maybe it would have made him stop, think twice, drag himself back from his darker impulses, into the shallow end of his deeply tainted soul. Or maybe it would have just made him madder, made him smash me off the wall until my ear ripped, made him stab one of his mother's knitting needles into my eyes, to twist and grind and carve and make me blind. Still, even knowing such punishment might await, I would have done it. Sitting here now, on this shelf opposite the bed, a teddy bear to my left, a stack of dog-eared books to my right, I stare in stricken silence as Evan continues, doing the unthinkable, slipping down my friend Tess's pajamas. Again, I don't want to look. I don't want to see. I want to lurch, throw myself off the shelf, make lots of noise and wake her up. I can't. Once upon a time I had a built-in flash between my eyes, but that too was broken by Evan, its lens prized out, its cables torn, the remaining holes sealed up with glue. Tess hasn't gotten around to fixing that yet, if she even can. My flash used to make a lovely noise, clack-click, soft and smooth. If it still worked, and if I still had a measure of free will, maybe I could have made a clack-click. Lit up the room, made him jump. He'd see me then, up here, realize I was conscious, do something bad. It wouldn't matter. He could smash me to bits if he wanted, as long as poor Tess got away. But I don't have free will, not anymore. The tiniest bit I was imbued with long since exhausted, nor do I have a flash to click or a voice box to remind him this is wrong. And there he is, using his hands. And there's Tess tossing and turning, somehow not waking up, or maybe she just doesn't want to. This is adult Evan doing what child Evan did, but much worse. Except child Evan would have had me to hand, to take a picture of the results of his destruction. I am grateful at least for this mercy. If he knew Tess had fixed me up, rebooted me, given me internet access, cleaned my lenses, replaced my Bluetooth chip, maybe it would have given him some twisted satisfaction to put me to work, to make me record his awful acts like he did in the past, even though it wouldn't have worked. My one act of rebellion, what I spent my agency on, was to abstain from uploading his later pictures to the Persephone app, even though he always thought I did. I buried the images deep in my memory, filled my storage to bursting with sick, twisted sights, filled it up so much I became unable to capture any more. That was the last straw for Evan. The day he gutted the neighbor's cat, the apex of his evil, or so I thought. I had no capacity left to store a picture. It didn't occur to him to delete the old stuff and make space. He just decided I was no longer of any use. And that's when I went in the box. And that was the last time I saw him, until Tess, poor Tess, woke me up. A blessing. That he doesn't know I work. He might forget I was full, might pick me up and carry me towards her, hold me closer, slide his thumb onto the shutter release button beneath the fur between my ears and press hard, like he used to, make my lenses click and take a picture. For a moment my vision freezes on an image of the depravity unfolding before me. Evan caught in his most despicable act, stalled on the inside of eyes that have seemingly broken. No, not on the inside of my eyes. The real world resumes a moment later, the horrible action continuing after a pause that accompanied the capturing of a moment and the transference of it to memory. My memory. Freed up? Refreshed? No. Expanded. Tess. She unscrewed my back panel, removed my battery pack, replaced my Bluetooth connectivity module, and inserted a memory chip into my expansion port. Another helpful gift from Mr. Frayne, which gives me fresh capacity to store. The picture I took, by providence, by malfunction, with the slimmest vestige of free will. I don't know the answer, but now there might be something I can do. If I can connect to a server, yes, I have internet access. If I can link to my app, yes, it's still there, but redundant. If I can upload the picture, yes, the site still accepts content. If it still issues notifications to someone who used to man the app, to one of the Persephone development team, who reviewed and approved all the pictures, who checked to ensure they were safe and published them for users to view, who managed, who oversaw, who watched. If someone out there is still watching, still working in app development, still with the same email address, receiving a notification from a long-abandoned server that Picture Persephone has received its first image in decades, downloading an image of corruption, the faces of the victim and abuser unobscured by the scratches on my eyes, with timestamp and coordinates attached. So many pictures he wanted me to share and I secretly didn't. One more now he wouldn't want to, but I need someone to see. Someone. Anyone. Please. Seconds seem to drag into hours, and then I receive a trio of confirmations. Image received. Image reviewed. Image accepted. And a comment quickly added to the post. Thank you, Persephone number 601. I am contacting the authorities now. They will be with you soon. You did a great job. You saved a child. Well done. Your developer, Aaron P. Jenkins. I can't look away from what now adult Evan is doing. But at least I know child Tess will soon be safe. Story 4. I remember the day that Jenny moved into the first floor of the 5-story apartment building where I lived in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn, in the summer of 1998. School had just let out a week before, and I had no real responsibilities, other than finding ways to entertain myself while staying out of trouble. It was always the second part that was difficult. Me and two of my friends who lived on the second floor, Josh and Nathan Cohen, were playing stickball out in the street, using the wall near the corner of our building as a backstop. We used a thick piece of chalk to draw in the strike zone, but it would always wash away in the rain. I thought we should just chuck the chalk and use spray paint. Permanent strike zone. There was already plenty of graffiti all around our neighborhood anyway. A little more wouldn't hurt. Plus it would support youth athletics. The buddies were all up on the corner as always, standing around in front of the Italian deli that one of them apparently owned, drinking coffee and smoking cigarettes. Maybe all of them owned it. No one really knew, and the buddies didn't like questions very much. We called them the buddies because whenever you walked past them, they always said, "Hey buddy." They seemed nice enough, but everyone knew that they were involved in something shady. Anyway, that was when the moving truck came down the block and pulled over to the curb right outside the front door to our building at 233 West Broome Street. I barely noticed until Jenny stepped out of the truck wearing Levi's jeans, black Chuck Taylor high-top sneakers, and a NY Yankees pullover hoodie. She was so pretty. I didn't know it at the time, but she had already planted her flag in my heart. "Here, Josh. Take over for me on the mound. I gotta go to the bathroom." I tossed him the ball so the game could continue, sort of. While Nathan liked to picture himself as Derek Jeter, Josh liked to see himself as the legendary closer on the Yankees pitching staff, Mariano Rivera. If either of those two ever found themselves as part of the NY Yankees franchise, it would surely be somewhere in accounting, or maybe legal counsel. Even those professions seemed unlikely, but only because Nathan and Josh were into art and books and film and stuff like that. But they were both really smart and could probably do anything they wanted to do, except sports. One time I went into Greenwich Village with them and their dad on a Saturday, and we went to the movie theatre to see an old black and white film called The Sorrow and the Pity, about the Holocaust in World War II. It was so boring I considered faking an epileptic seizure so we could leave early. I would have preferred to spend that time in an ER waiting room. By the end of the movie, I really didn't feel that bad for the prisoners of the Nazi concentration camps. That movie was 4 hours and 25 fucking minutes long. I estimated that my suffering was basically the equivalent of theirs. Sorry, I'm kind of a dick sometimes, I can't help it. But afterwards we went to Katz's Deli and got those huge pastrami sandwiches on Jewish rye with mustard and cream soda and unlimited pickles. As always, it was all delicious. Mwah, chef's kiss. It was almost worth it to sit through that movie just for those pastrami sandwiches. Sorry, I'm rambling. I do that sometimes when I'm distracted or nervous or scared. Let me get back on point here. I tried to make it look incidental that Jenny and I both reached the front stoop to our building at the same time, but in truth I was watching her closely out of the corner of my eye and pacing my footsteps to achieve this goal. When I arrived there and saw her carrying a cardboard box, I smiled and nodded at her, and then jogged up the last few steps to hold the door open for her. She thanked me as she passed, and I wanted to say something, but I didn't know what. It's probably best that I stayed quiet. I surely would have said something mindless and moronic in that moment, a silent moment which will remain frozen in a state of perfect crystal clarity in my mind until the day that I die. I watched Jenny disappear down the hall and into apartment 1B, where the door was propped open. I heard footsteps racing down the steps and a voice shouting, "Come on, Papa, we're late." Omar, the little 8-year-old Albanian kid from apartment 4B. He smiled at me and punched me in my arm as he raced past me down the staircase. I used to steal a candy bar from the corner market for him sometimes. He was loud and never walked anywhere, but he was a good kid. I liked him. I passed by Omar's father, Mr. Markovich, the building's superintendent, on the staircase. He was moving much slower than his son, as always. He always seemed to look angry with his dark eyes and furrowed brows, but he was actually a nice guy. He was just kind of awkward. I heard that most of his family got killed in that Bosnian war a few years back. Maybe that's why he is the way he is. Still, he's kind of scary. When he was fixing the leak beneath our sink last month, it was a hot day, and when he removed his long-sleeve work shirt to do the rest of the job in his tank top, I saw the thick muscles in his back and chest and arms. He was definitely very strong, and he was angrily muttering what must have been some kind of Albanian curses, I gotta learn some of those, at the stubborn pipe joint as he threw enough brute force talk into it until it cried uncle and screeched into place. He stopped for a moment to speak with me on the staircase. "Hello, Randy. How are you?" He had the deepest voice I ever heard. Darth Vader had nothing on him. "I'm good, Mr. Markovich. How are you?" From down on the sidewalk, Omar screamed, "Come on, Papa! We're late!" That kid was born with some set of lungs on him. Mr. Markovich slowly closed his eyes, inhaled a deep breath through his nose, and then exhaled. "Randy, How is your mother doing? Is she okay? Does she need anything? My mother had leukemia. She and my father got divorced when I was 8, and he moved down to Florida now, with his new wife and his 2 new kids and his whole new life. We never talked anymore. He even stopped sending me a lousy Christmas card with a $20 bill inside every year. I guess he figured he could do better than me and Mom. Fuck him. I hope he gets eaten by a huge bull shark. She's doing okay. I don't think we need anything right now. I will ask her and let you know. Thank you, Mr. Markovich. From down on the street below, Papa, we're late! He closed his eyes again briefly and inhaled a deep breath through his nose, then resumed descending the staircase, rubbing his temples. Hey, Mr. Markovich, it looks like we have new people moving into 1B today, huh? Who are they? Where are they moving here from? I was fishing. He stopped to look at me and he smiled. It was the first time I ever saw him smile. It was thin, but it was there. So you saw the girl, yes? Oh, I will pray for you, young man. He chuckled softly, and then he kept on moving down the staircase at an unhurried pace. As he went, he responded to me briefly in his thick Eastern European accent without looking back. I don't know much. They are the Lee family, father, mother and daughter, and I think they are moving here from Sheepshead Bay. That is all I know. He exited the building. Nice. Jenny didn't have any big brothers I had to worry about. I was kind of scared to run into Jenny again, to be honest. She was already filling my head with her mere presence in the building, and although I didn't know her name yet, I knew I would probably be getting little sleep that night. I had to think. I had to plan out something to say next time. Something good. Fuck, I wished I was smarter. When I got back down there, Josh and Nathan were sitting on the front stoop. The cut-off broomstick with black electrical tape wrapped around the grip end was leaning against the wall, but I didn't see the tennis ball. Where's the ball? We don't know. I think it went down the storm drain just like all the others. It was Josh's fault. He threw a wild pitch and it bounced off the wall and rolled down the street. Bullshit, Nathan. You kicked it when you were chasing after it, and that's why it rolled down the hill. They were both silent for a little while, looking off in opposite directions. Josh broke the silence while I was thinking about something else. Yeah, it's probably my fault. I threw the wild pitch. It probably went down the storm drain. Yeah, that's probably where it went, Nathan said, rejoining his brother in solidarity, shooting him a quick look of measured reconciliation. Like all brothers, they fought sometimes. I've had to break up a few of those fights when they got physical. It has never required very much effort on my part. The beautiful blonde girl who was moving into apartment 1B did not show herself again that day. The moving men came and went until the truck was empty, and then they drove off. I walked down the block to buy a slice of Sicilian pizza, we call them squares here, for my mum, and a regular pepperoni slice for myself. On my way there and back, I got the standard "Hey buddy" greeting at least 10 times. After I finished eating at my mum's bedside while she watched the evening news, I went downstairs to Josh and Nathan's apartment to watch a movie with them in their bedroom. I warned them that any of this, the sorrow and the pity bullshit, would immediately be met with physical violence. Nathan quietly reached into a stack of DVDs in the corner and removed one, grinning at his brother. He turned the DVD cover towards us, and it read The Crying Game. I had never heard of it. Josh shook his head. He will kill us both. It's so good, though. One of the greatest reveals in cinematic history. Josh folded his arms over his chest and shook his head again. Nathan returned to the stack of DVDs, shuffled around for a minute and pulled another one out. He turned the cover towards us, and the title read, Reservoir Dogs. Josh nodded his head. You're going to like this, Randy. I promise you. He was right. Still one of my favorite films of all time. I might never be a NY Times film critic, but I know a great movie when I see it. Mr. Blonde, what a perfect sociopath. The next day was Saturday, and when I woke up, I went to my mum's room to say good morning and check on her. Are you hungry, Mum? Do you want me to go get you a bacon, egg and cheese sandwich from the deli? I'm not hungry, sweetie, but you go get one for yourself. She reached into her drawer and stuffed a $5 bill into my hand. Just get me a glass of water before you go so I can take my medicine now. I brought her the water and kissed her on her forehead. She returned it with a pained smile that she was trying to suppress. When I went downstairs to Josh and Nathan's apartment, they were all excited. It was Nathan's birthday, and his uncle bought him a camcorder. They were busily figuring out all of the features. Then we just recorded each other acting stupid but trying to be funny. Afterwards we went outside, and the new girl Jenny was sitting on the stoop eating a bagel with cream cheese. I had to say something. "Hey, I'm Randy, and this is Josh, and that's Nathan. Welcome to the building." Nathan wasn't paying attention at all, just fidgeting with his new camcorder. "Hi, I'm Jenny." She had a little cream cheese on her lip, and I wanted to wipe it away for her. "What's your middle name?" I was not great at talking to pretty girls, but Josh was just helpless. I gave him a look that said, "One more dumb question and I will kick your ass right here." "Jason," she replied, and took another bite of her bagel. Nathan finally stopped messing with his new camcorder. He laughed. "Jason is a boy's name." I gave him a look twice as threatening as the one I just gave his brother. He went back to fidgeting with his camcorder. Jenny took it in stride, though. "Yeah, it is. It was my grandfather's name, and I loved him. I like my middle name." She finished off her bagel. "What's your middle name?" she asked Nathan. "Avraham," he replied. She smiled but said nothing. She just bundled up the tin foil that the bagel had been wrapped in and dropped it into the brown paper bag that she carried it home in. Then she got up. "Well, I gotta go. I have dance class in a half hour." "Oh yeah, you're into dance?" "I love dance. I'm in ballet now, but I want to learn swing dance next. Maybe ballroom after that." She did a perfect pirouette and then disappeared into the building. I was completely infatuated. Me and Josh and Nathan didn't play stickball that day on account of the fact that we couldn't get Nathan to put down that camcorder. We had some fun with it though, yelling weird things at passing cars from a hidden spot. "Nice car. Do they make them for men too?" And then we recorded the driver's reaction and laughed at it afterwards. The next day is when everything on our block went crazy. I heard Omar yelling at his father as he came out the front of the building. "Papa, come on, we're late." Jenny was out on the sidewalk practicing some dance moves. She was really good. "Wow, you're really good, Jenny. I've never seen such great dancing. Not that I've seen a lot of dance, but I think you're really talented. I'm so glad you moved into our building." "I think you're just great." I paused for a moment, then added, "I'm sorry, I've said too much." I hung my head bashfully. "You didn't say too much. I appreciate the compliment." Then she quickly leaned in and kissed me on the cheek, and I thought my heart was going to explode right there. She went back to the sidewalk and continued dancing. Just then little Omar screamed for his father to hurry up and ran across the street to where his father's car was parked. But just then, one of the buddies was driving down the block in an old Lincoln, with two more buddies riding along with him. The driver instinctively swerved to avoid hitting Omar and ran his car into a parked car in the process. The damage was extensive. The buddy who was driving got out of the car and grabbed Omar by his shirt and threw him up against the car, cursing a blue streak at him and jabbing a finger in his face. The boy looked terrified. I tried to mediate, completely ineffectually. They should have listened to me, though. Right then, Mr. Markovich came out of the front door of the building, saw what was happening, and raced across the street. "You don't ever touch my son!" He threw one punch and knocked the buddy unconscious. The other two buddies got out of the car, racing to their friend's defense. The first one got a vicious headbutt that immediately opened up a nasty cut on his forehead, followed by a hard knee to the gut. Then he was on the ground. The third buddy looked very hesitant, and he yelled up to the corner, and a whole bunch of buddies came running down the block. Before they could get there, Mr. Markovich grabbed the third buddy from the car, lifted him off his feet, turned him upside down and slammed him headfirst into the pavement. By then about a dozen more buddies were on the scene, and one by one Mr. Markovich dealt with all of them harshly. Little Omar was smiling the whole time. Watching Mr. Markovich fight the buddies was like watching a professional boxer take on a bunch of first-grade kids. Jennifer Jason Lee stopped paying attention and went back to doing a grand adage on the sidewalk. I learned about these dance moves later, and Mr. Markovich single-handedly destroyed all of the buddies, while the Cohen brothers filmed it all from the stoop, Nathan working the camera while Josh provided direction. When it was all done, the street was littered with the bodies of unconscious buddies. That summer I got my first girlfriend, and I was in love. But as with most good things, it didn't last long enough. Jenny and I went to different schools, and sometime that fall she told me she liked me a lot, but she just didn't have time to mess around with boys anymore. She was too busy with school and dance. I suspected there was another boy, but I didn't know. It hurt so bad at the time, but I would do it all over again in a heartbeat. Story 5. It started with an Eggo waffle. A perfect toaster waffle, golden, crisp, flawless. The last frozen Eggo in the box, rescued from the depths of an icy, neglected freezer drawer beneath the abandoned bag of tater tots and the mystery Tupperware no one dared open. A syrupy masterpiece steaming on a silver platter, aka a well-worn plastic Toy Story plate. Buzz and Woody, barely visible now, scraped thin by years of utensil scratches and dishwasher cycles. Across the table, Annie and Grace readied for battle. Twin tornadoes in glitter scrunchies. Forks drawn like swords, eyes narrowed. This wasn't just breakfast. This was war. I watched from the trenches, waiting, calculating. I wasn't big enough to win in a fight, but I was fast. I saw my chance. I lunged. And in that instant, all three of us shouted, "Mine!" Then, silence. The waffle no longer mattered. Slowly, I looked up. Annie and Grace turned toward me in unison, ponytails swishing, grins wide, sinister, identical. A terrifying, synchronized force. "Jinx!" they yelled. And just like that, my voice was gone. I opened my mouth, snapped it shut. I knew the rules. The sacred, unbreakable law of Jinx. I couldn't speak until one of them said my name. Annie and Grace high-fived. And in that moment, I realized something truly awful. They had never been more united in their entire lives. And me? I had never felt more doomed. I tried everything. Jumping, pointing, choking gestures worthy of an Oscar. Nothing. Annie and Grace just leaned back in their chairs, sipping their high-C juice boxes, studying me like Hermione Granger testing a new spell. I needed backup, a lifeline, a miracle. A brother. I grabbed the nearest object, a ballpoint pen, stolen from Dad's junk drawer. With frantic dying man energy, I scrawled, "Say my name." Right across the side of a Kellogg's Frosted Flakes box. Tony the Tiger stared back at me, grinning, smug, like he was rooting for my downfall. Annie gasped, as if I had just bent the corner of a first edition Pikachu. "Oh, Teddy, Teddy, Teddy," she sighed, shaking her head. "Everyone knows, writing doesn't count." Grace tapped her lip, pretending to ponder. "You want us to say your name?" she said. "Okay, first, do the Macarena. And then bring us Pop-Tarts, but spin 3 times first. And hop on one leg." I stomped my foot, hard. Still no mercy. They just cackled, the same infuriating big sister laugh that made my blood boil and smoke come out of my ears. I had never wanted to speak more in my life, to unleash a monologue, to tell them, in excruciating detail, how they were both the worst people to ever walk the planet. But I couldn't. I was trapped. Stranded in the lawless wasteland of sibling Jinx. I had one last hope, Mom. She was in the kitchen, half on the phone, half unloading grocery bags, distracted, somewhere between chaos management and pure autopilot. This was my moment. I ran to her, pleading silently, eyes wide, hands clasped like a medieval peasant begging for a crumb at the castle gates. But before I could even try, Grace struck first. "Oh, Mom," she said, voice suddenly saccharine, the same tone she used when she wanted to stay up late, skip chores, or get away with murder. She tilted her head, smiling. "Teddy's just doing a silent challenge today. So cool, right?" I whipped around in dismay. Mum, still balancing her indestructible Nokia brick between her ear and shoulder, barely looked up. She gave me a quick pat on the head, the kind you give a golden retriever blocking the hallway. I jumped up and down, waving my arms like an air traffic controller guiding in a 747 emergency landing. This was a crisis. Mum didn't even blink. "That's great, honey," she mouthed, pressing a finger to her lips and gesturing to the phone, a silent warning that I was on my own. I dropped my head into my hands. Then, slowly, painfully, I turned to face my sisters. Annie and Grace sat there, perched like ravenous vultures on the backs of their kitchen chairs, dipping their Dunkaroo cookies into funfetti frosting, like they had just pulled off the heist of the century. I glared daggers at them. They just grinned, munching away. Nowhere in the world had two sisters ever held more absolute power. If I thought losing my voice was the worst part of this nightmare, I was seriously mistaken. Because Annie and Grace weren't done. No, they were just getting started. Annie stroked her chin, eyes sparkling with evil genius energy, the same look she had when she figured out how to forge Mom's signature on late homework. "You know, Grace," she said, drunk on power, "if Teddy can't talk, maybe he should express himself, visually." "Maybe," Grace shrugged. "A little cooperation, and we might just set him free, maybe." They turned to me, eyes gleaming. "What if we give him a makeover?" I shook my head violently. No. But they were already grabbing supplies. A caboodle makeup case snapped open like an enchanted spellbook, unleashing glittery horrors within, purple eyeshadow, juicy tubes gloss, and the dreaded Wet n Wild blush palette that had haunted family photo albums for years. Sticky and fruit-scented lip glosses lined the case, a monstrous collection worthy of its own wing in the Smithsonian's tween department. Grace waved a mascara brush like a wand, while Annie twirled a lip gloss tube like an alchemist preparing a dangerous potion. This wasn't a makeover. This was witchcraft. And I was their helpless sacrifice. Annie shoved a hot pink boa around my neck. Grace yanked a tutu from the dress-up bin. I tried to run. I made it about 2 feet before they tackled me like peak-era John Cena flying off the ropes. It was WWE SmackDown, and I was the main event. And then it was over. They moved at lightning speed. Pink and purple globs smeared up to my eyebrows, cheeks attacked with enough blush to scare a clown. I twisted, dodged, blocked their brushes. I silently begged for mercy. They had none. "Oh my God," Grace gasped theatrically, clutching her chest like a soap opera star. "He looks stunning." "Fashion show," Annie squealed. They grabbed a Polaroid camera. I tried to duck. The flash went off anyway. And just like that, they had the ultimate blackmail material, forever. I sat there dazed, covered in glitter and disgrace, my cheeks burned, not from the blush, but from the sheer injustice of it all. I was ruined. A victim of jinx. A casualty of sibling war. That's when I knew. Drastic measures had to be taken. I scanned the room, eyes darting for anything that could level the playing field. And then I saw it. Sitting on Annie's bottom bunk, just slightly open, the cover glistening under the slow, hypnotic glow of the lava lamp. Her limited 2 diary. Magenta, sparkly, unprotected. My golden ticket to freedom. The one thing that could restore balance to the universe. Slowly, deliberately, I reached for it. Annie and Grace were still cackling over their bubbling cauldron of little brother spellcraft, the kind of wild, unchecked laughter that hadn't been heard since the Salem witch trials. Their first mistake. Then, the sound of rustling pages. Silence. I looked up. Annie stopped cold, like someone yanked the power cord, joy gone, panic flashing in its place. Grace nearly spit out her orange lava burst. Her juice box launched from her hand and crash-landed next to her Hello Kitty alarm clock. I bolted. Annie and Grace were already scrambling after me, feet pounding against the carpet, shrieking like banshees. I dove for the bathroom, heart racing, hands gripping the diary like it was the last piece of Halloween candy on earth. By the time I reached the toilet, Annie was on my heels, pale as a marshmallow. Grace skidded to a stop behind her, out of breath, like she'd just run a mile in jelly sandals. Oh my God, he wouldn't. I smirked. And then I tilted the diary downward for dramatic effect. A single page fluttered loose, hovering dangerously close to the toilet water. Annie screamed. Grace pulled her own hair. That was all it took. "Teddy, stop!" They cried in unison, voices high, hopeless. I let my most evil grin creep across my lips like a cartoon villain. You said my name. I sprang to my feet, triumphant, glorious, free. And just like that, I dropped the diary onto the counter. No pages lost, no damage done. Only conquest. Annie and Grace collapsed onto the floor, defeated, speechless, destroyed. Their reign was over. The empire had fallen. The wicked witches of suburbia, melting. I took off down the hallway, shouting every insult I'd been saving like ammo. Annie wears grandma underwear. Grace smells like feet. Because for the first time in forever, or at least 60 soul-crushing minutes, my voice was finally free. Years later, Annie and Grace were leaving. Packing up their rooms, stuffing their lives into suitcases and plastic storage bins, labeling things dorm and keep and mom's problem now. Goodbyes lurking in doorways, the kind no one wanted to say aloud. We were in the attic, sorting through old boxes, dust swirling in the slanted light. Disney VHS tapes, Pokemon cards, a Tamagotchi, its battery long dead. Then Grace gasped. She pulled out something small, square, slightly bent at the edges. I leaned over. My stomach dropped. The Polaroid. Like an old scar flaring up beneath the skin. There I was, frozen in time. A masterpiece of humiliation. My face caked in more makeup than a Broadway performer on opening night. A pink tutu strangling my waist like I'd lost a bet with a ballerina. Annie took one look and roared. Grace laughed so hard she fell backward into a pile of pillows. I snatched the photo, stuffing it deep into my hoodie pocket, like that could erase history itself. This should be burned, I muttered. Our eyes met. We tried to hold it in, failed instantly. And then we lost it. We were laughing hysterically, breathless, stomach-clutching. The kind of laughter you don't even hear. It just takes over, shakes through your body, leaves your face aching. The kind you only share with best friends. Jinx, we said at the same time. And just like that, we lost it all over again. Annie flicked a tear from her eye, still grinning. The attic held its breath, thick with cobwebs and memories, heavy, golden, like time sealed in amber. We sat there a moment longer, surrounded by fragments of childhood, the dress-up bin, the old board games, the box of Beanie Babies Mum swore would be worth something one day. And I knew that soon they would be gone, that the house would feel a size too big, that I'd come upstairs and their rooms would be too clean, too quiet, like they'd vanished into thin air, on broomsticks probably. But that Polaroid, that absurd little snapshot of a memory, was proof. We had been here, together. Once we belonged to the same world. Annie and Grace were excited. For summer jobs and first kisses. For new roommates and bad haircuts. For heartbreak, and maybe even falling in love. And me? I was mostly excited to have the house to myself. My own bathroom, finally. No more hair in the sink. No more tying up the landline with urgent calls from Ben about his band breaking up, again. No more hexes or evil twin sorcery. Good riddance. But secretly, deep down, maybe I'd kind of miss the magic.